Well, today the U.S. is remembering a significant milestone, the 50th anniversary of the passage of the Clean Water Act. The act revolutionized America's responsibility to protect and restore our vital waterways and mark the occasion. And to mark that occasion, environmental leaders from Washington chose to come to the place where the fight started, the city of Cleveland. Here's News 5's John Kosick.
This News 5 film represents the only pictures that exist of the Cuyahoga River fire on June 22, 1969. That is in part because it was almost an afterthought. Today, the story of a river on fire would be national news, but in 1969, it was a Sunday. It wasn't the first fire in the river, and it most certainly wasn't the worst. But what it was the last, because it came at a time when the mood towards America's waterways was changing, and the Cuyahoga, it was about to become the poster child. A story less than 6 weeks later in Time magazine showed the river ablaze, images that would shock a nation into action. Truth be told, the massive flames they showed with tugboats ablaze was not the 1969 fire, but one from 17 years earlier in 1952. Cleveland Mayor Carl Stokes and his newly elected Congressman brother Lewis would go before Congress demanding action, helping to get past the Clean Water Act of 1972 that was celebrated here this day.
All federal legislation doesn't always work. The Clean Water Act worked.
Environmental leaders gathered from Washington on the river, whose fire led to the very creation of the Environmental Protection Agency.
You know, it's overwhelming.
Michael Regan is the current EPA administrator.
When you come back and talk to community members and stand and have a river as a backdrop that would spontaneously catch fire because it was so polluted, it really brings the work to a level of reality that encourages all of us to fight just as hard over the next 50 years.
The Cuyahoga River has undergone tens of millions of dollars to clean up over the last several decades, and while it remains listed as one of the EPA's areas of concern, it is inching closer to getting off that list. The gathering taking place at Merwin's Wharf across the river from Irishtown Bend, which is slated to undergo a $45 million transformation. Another point environmental leaders like to make, that every dollar invested in cleanup generates $3 in economic development, all coming because people over 50 years ago said enough.
You know, the solutions don't come from the top down, they come from the bottom up.
In Cleveland, John Kosick, News 5.
Now, despite the progress, more still needs to be done. In February, President Biden came to Lorain to pledge $1 billion from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act to the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. Now, some of that will help speed up the process of cleaning the Great Lakes' most polluted rivers. They're called areas of concern. Ohio was home to 4 of those rivers, including the Cuyahoga, Maumee, Ashtabula, and Black Rivers. The Ashtabula River was delisted in August of last year after a 33-year and $67.5 million cleanup. That cleanup removed 14,000 pounds of cancer-causing PCPs and enough hazardous sediment to fill 350 football fields up to a foot.
Wow.